Hey dudes, it's Lerald. So I have played a ton of Toxic Rain Pathfinder this league, and I really enjoyed it, but I wanted to play a build that does a lot more single target damage. Just something completely different from Chaos Damage over time Bow Pathfinder. And here I am with a Chaos Damage over time Dagger Pathfinder. I have a type. So this build is extremely easy to play. You basically just walk around and right-click enemies and they all die instantly. The damage output is preposterous. The DoT cap in PoE 1 is 35.7 million DPS. That is the most damage that an enemy can take from damage over time. And that is more than enough damage to annihilate most of the content in this game very quickly. Damage over time and the DoT cap also work very well with mechanics that reduce monster damage taken, like Delirium or the Uber Boss mods that give them 70% less damage taken. This build deals enough damage to still hit the DoT cap in 60% Delirious maps, and it's still over 34 million DPS at 80% Delirious, so it's just way over the amount of damage required to hit the DoT cap consistently. And while I won't say that this build is super cheap, it's not a 1000 Divine build either. It's not a mirror tier build by any stretch of the imagination. The damage scaling is extremely strong for how much this build costs to get set up and running. It's one of the most cost-effective builds in the game, for sure. So I have blasted Uber Bosses tier 17s and tier 16.5s with relative ease. I was doing some insanely hard 8-mod Risk Scarab tier 16.5 harvest map farming and actually having a little bit of struggle at times. And I was starting to question myself a bit, so then I went and did some Uber Bosses and I was just face tanking them. I very intentionally ate 3 different Uber Shaper Slams and didn't really get that close to dying. I did a Deathless Uber Exarch while just completely botching the ball phase, like no problem, he never stood a chance. Risk farming is just risky. Sometimes it'll kill you, but most of the time it doesn't. This build can do the vast majority of map mods as well, but there are a couple that I prefer not to do unless, you swap some points around in the tree or something like that. Otherwise, this build destroyed everything I threw at it. It does an absurd amount of damage. It does it on a relatively low budget for a super high-end build. It's tanky. It has all of the amazing quality of life you expect to get from a Pathfinder, the built-in mage bloodification of the whole Ascendancy. It's really something special. So let's get into it, but first be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also join our Discord. There's a link in the description. Alright, let's talk about the build. So this build is a perfect Mamba Pathfinder. It is something I played fairly late into Settlers League after most people had already quit, and you're taking Perfect Agony, where you have to crit in order to deal damage over time, and then you scale all of your damage over time effects with critical strike multiplier instead of DoT multi, which makes it much easier to get massive damage scaling. There is a downside to this. Obviously, you have to crit, which is normally pretty hard to deal with, but you can get a lot of crit chance out of Second Sight from a Brutal Restraint in the Akara of Nasima, and Brutal Restraints in this area can be really good. So it's actually pretty easy to get very close to the crit cap without ambush, and then you can also use ambush, which will very easily guarantee that you're at the crit cap. It's also just pretty easy to hit the crit cap if you're using daggers, which we are because of backstabbing. Your first hit on most enemies is going to always be a crit, even without ambush, and enemies just simply can't live long enough for there to be a second hit, right? You hit them once, they hit the floor, those are the 2 hits. So the other thing that you're combining with that is Viper Strike of the Mamba. Now, Viper Strike of the Mamba behaves differently from every other kind of poison skill in the game. Most poison skills, you want to apply many poisons at once, and have them, ramped up. So you want to hit very quickly and scale the duration of the poison, all of that. Viper Strike of the Mamba works more like a bleed or like an ignite, where you can only have one doing damage, but it does an insane amount of damage. It has this insane poison scaling, 200% more damage from poison at level 20, and then 40% from quality, and then we could scale that quality up with an Ashes of the Stars to get it up to 300% more damage with poison, which is crazy. Now, you can only apply the one poison. You can't poison a pre-poisoned enemy, but you're able to scale that with low tolerance, which we get on every single medium cluster that we're possibly capable of fitting in. We're using 6 of those, and then we're also taking the poison mastery that does the same thing, so we're getting that 7 times. So 2100% increased damage with poisons on non-poisoned enemies, which any enemy that we poison is going to have to be non-poisoned for us to be able to inflict that poison in the first place. So that's obviously an absolutely outrageous amount of increased damage, 2100% increased damage, and then a 300% more damage multiplier. Like, it's just obvious that you're going to be able to slam this up to the DoT cap with like very little effort. And then we're also able to use pneumatic daggers to be able to poison with elemental damage, so we can get lightning and cold damage, or fire damage is also great, but I got cold damage on my rolls. And then we can also use like a blizzard crown to add in a bunch of extra flat cold damage. We can get a bit of like flat elemental damage out of rings or gloves if it's available. I didn't get them on the gloves or this ring, but I did on this ring. You know, very, very, very easy to get enough damage to, you know, not just hit the DoT cap, but hit the DoT cap on like 60% or 80% delirious. So that's effectively how the build is able to do such outrageous amounts of damage. Now let's talk a little bit about leveling. I played this build toward the end of Settlers League, I think I already said that, and at the time I made a leveling guide and kind of just a quick walkthrough of the build, and so I basically just followed along with my own guide to see if it's any good, and thankfully it really was. This is, if I just jump here, like I have a whole walkthrough, level 12. I always like to, on any ranger build, come take Primal Spirit first thing, just very easy to maintain, like mana and so on. I came down and took Gladiator's Perseverance and got the Attack Mastery first, and then came over and took the Poison Mastery that gives 300% increased damage. I think if I were to do it again, I would do it the other way around. Get that Poison Mastery first, and then get the second target with the attacks. I mean, they both work fine, but like as soon as I got this Poison Mastery, it was off to the races. Like nothing could live at all. As soon as I hit it with Viper Strike of the Mamba, which I switched over to that at level 16. I think, you know, you basically want to come get the Poison Mastery and then make that swap. It was just like game over. Prior to that point, I used Cobra Lash. I do have some skills here. Cobra Lash, Frostblink, Whirling Blades, just very basic. You just run around killing everything. And then once you hit level 16, Viper Strike of the Mamba. I mean, the leveling experience is basically over at that point. Everything will die the moment that you hit it. All you really have to do is maintain your claws or daggers. Either will work fine for the rest of the leveling experience. This is just the rest of the tree all the way up into the like mid 70s. And then from there on, you can basically just progress toward the full in-game tree, which I'm using 5 passive voices, which are very cheap, less than a divine each. If you have a lot of currency to throw away, you can buy 1 or 3 passive voices and save yourself a bunch of points to spend elsewhere. But, you know, that's kind of what I went with. It was very smooth. I didn't even upgrade my claws between Act 4 and Act 10. I didn't realize that I hadn't bothered. Everything was just dead so quickly it didn't matter. So now let's move on to the passive tree, and I'll start with the Ascendancy. So the progression that I go with through the campaign is I will take Master Toxicist first. You know, this will give you a lot more poison damage as long as a flask is up, and you just want to have like, honestly, while you're doing the campaign, you kind of just want to have like a bunch of Quicksilver flasks with the modifier that gives you like use automatically when they hit full. That'll guarantee it's always up pretty much all the time while you're in the campaign, and then you're going to do a ton more damage and spread that poison around, get very easy clear as well. Then I take Nature's Adrenaline, and then I follow that up by taking Master Surgeon, and I actually don't take Nature's Reprisal until the very end, and the reason for this is kind of twofold. One, normally poison builds you're wanting to hit as fast as you can, as quickly as you can. That's exactly the opposite with Viper Strike of the Mamba. Like, if you could hit 100 times a second, it won't do any more damage than hitting once a second. But that does mean that you're not really going to be applying a lot of Withered stacks through Nature's Reprisal. You're basically just going to get them out of Withering Step, which is fine. You do so much damage that it just doesn't matter that you have Nature's Reprisal, basically until you're completely in the end game, like doing tier 16 and beyond. Uber bosses is really, I think, the first time where you absolutely need to have Nature's Reprisal. Prior to that point, you just really don't need it. So it really is like less important than the other 3 for just getting through the campaign quickly and safely and easily. Now, in terms of the rest of the tree, it's pretty simple. Like, a lot of these bonuses are just, like, very obviously good. Twin Terrors, getting crit chance while dual wielding, of course, that's good. You know, getting life, getting, like, reservation efficiency, all of this stuff, pretty good. Spell suppression, all of that. So getting a Brutal Restraint is really important. It'll give you a ton of dexterity in this part of the tree, which helps with then tattooing a bunch of your dexterity away to get, like, stun immunity through the Tide Shifter tattoo. And then just a lot of the Tafoa Herbalist Flask Effect Duration tattoo can help as well for maintaining flask uptime on all of your flasks. And then I think I use 1 Ramako Shaman tattoo in here to get myself over the hump because I was at like 99% spell suppression. But you're just wanting to take like lots of points in the area around the Brutal Restraint. Obviously, it's going to be a Nasima one, so you can take Second Sight, have that more crit chance, but then you're going to get some bonuses. Ideally, you'll get bonuses like increased crit chance. That's a great one. Alchemist Genius is a really good one to get like at least one bonus of, because you're going to be popping a lot of flasks, and Alchemist Genius is like increased flask effect, increased flask charge generation, so it helps with all of that. Some other things like poisons inflict damage faster is very good, very, very good bonus, so that's really good to have. And then just like crit chance obviously is great, so big fan of that. Move speed, I think I got on one of these. That's pretty nice. So some of these bonuses around this area here may not be all that great on their own, but they might be worth taking just to get like a little bit of more value out of Brutal Restraint. I feel like this build is kind of done around like level 94 in terms of the tree construction. I do have some points up here because I am putting in an impossible escape here because I really want to apply my own despair. I could get this from my Mercenary, but it would then be a level 1 despair from the Mercenary. It'd be quite a lot lower because it'd be coming from her gloves. That's like a difference of like 16 Chaos Res or something like that. So it's a thing that you can swap around, but I chose to go this direction. It allows me to pick up Serpentine Spellslinger, which means -5 Chaos Res for the enemies as well, and then also influence more effective auras from my skills, which is, you know, pretty good. So I like that setup, but this is definitely something you could drop. I am using a Melding of the Flesh, and so, you know, you could just drop this and just use like another rare jewel that has +2 max lightning res and like some crit multi and life, and that could definitely swap in there as well, free you up some points, but at the expense of then having to like compensate for that elsewhere. And I'm really trying to optimize for single target damage, so I didn't want to give that up. As for the jewels, the main thing you're looking for on the cluster jewels, the medium cluster jewels, is that they are a 12% increased chaos damage over time, 4 passive skills cluster jewel. If it's 5 passive skills, then you'll have to take a second point in order to get to the jewel socket, which you don't want to do. You do not want 2 notables in your cluster jewels because there are no notables that are remotely close to as good as low tolerance. You can see this is like 12.5, almost 13% damage lost just on dropping that point. None of the other notables are remotely close. It is better to just simply get 3 like mods for the 1 point, and then low tolerance, and then the jewel socket for every single one of the medium clusters that you have in the entirety of your tree. And you're eventually going to be using 6. Now, as for unique gems, I'm using Forbidden Flame and Flesh. I bought, I don't know, I bought these for very expensive. They really aren't necessary. Like, if I drop them, I don't even fall, like, I don't even go below the DoT cap. It's completely unnecessary extra damage. But if you want to, Focal Point is very good. It makes your Alchemist mark hit very, very, very hard. And it also gives you some damage reduction in, like, AoE settings, multi-target settings. It's pretty good there. Really, it's just about getting that extra damage. I don't think that there are really many other options available to take that are particularly good. Now, as for the Watcher's Eye, I am using a Chaos Res while affected by Purity of Elements Watcher's Eye because we're using Purity. That is a really good bonus to have, as is the non-channeling skills have -10 total mana cost while affected by Clarity. This isn't mandatory, but it helps a lot. If you are struggling with mana, you can always use this Life Mastery. Skills cost life instead of 15% of mana cost. You can see that cuts my mana cost down from 8 to 6. Not a huge amount, but it's trivially easy to regenerate that life, and it does help a lot with some of the other skills that are quite a bit more expensive. Then the final bonus that I'm getting here is Damaging Ailments. You inflict deal damage 15% faster while affected by Malevolence. So I did buy this Watcher's Eye. It was pretty expensive, but it had like bad rolls, and I actually divined it until I got -10 mana cost and 15% faster Damaging Ailments. I think it took like 10 or 20 divines to actually get those bonuses, but I finally did get them. I was pretty happy with the state of this with this jewel. I know some people will use Replica Sorrow of the Divine. If I have this laying around somewhere, Replica Sorrow of the Divine is just a very basic unique flask. Let's see, Replica. Here it is. And what it does is it gives you Eldritch Battery while it's active. Very easy to maintain, 100% uptime on a Pathfinder. So this is something you can swap in at level 27, so like midway through the campaign. And this will fix mana as well, and it'll give you a full uptime on a Sulfur Flask, which isn't too bad. I just didn't feel that I needed it. But, you know, that's certainly an option you can use as like a budget version for fixing mana until you want to go a different direction. Now, as for the rest of your jewels, if you want to run a Melding of the Flesh setup, I think that is a good idea. I think it's a great way to scale up some defense. And the best way to do that is, I think, probably, the way that I did it with this jewel at least, is to buy fractured +2 maximum light res jewels and then roll them with the harvest crafting bench, either for like crit mod or life mod on the harvest bench. I'll walk over there and show that, right? You just bring them over here and then you just roll crit, that's 150 blue, or life, that's 75 purple. Life is definitely cheaper, but there are a lot more life mods, and basically what you're looking for is just a combination of like some good crit mods that apply to what you're doing, crit damage with one-handed weapons or crit damage with dual wielding or global crit, all of that's good. And then max life, right? That's pretty much all you're looking for those jewels. This one's not the greatest, but like it's pretty good. Crit chance, crit multi-well, dual wielding, life, and max light res, pretty good. Can't say that's like bad. Generally speaking, I think for the most part, buying these jewels just pre-rolled like this, it might be cheaper to buy a pre-fractured one like this one. Like this was 2 max light res, and then the rest of the mods were garbage. I bought this and rolled it myself, and it was good. This one with the fractured crit multi and then the real +2 max light res, this one I bought. This one would have cost more to roll myself than to buy. So kind of a mix of both. So for the most part, I think that pretty much covers the tree. Now let's move on to skills, I suppose. And Viper Strike of the Mamba has a pretty simple gem setup. You're going to want to use Awakened if you can on all of the gems. And if you don't want to use Awakened, you can't afford them, just use regular versions until you can. Melee fizz damage, added chaos damage, Awakened, regular, Swift Affliction, whatever, Deadly Ailments. These are all like must-haves. And then you have a choice. You can use Melee Splash. This is great for clear. This is why you're able to get good clear. There are a couple of other sources of Melee Splash in the game. In Settlers League, you were able to get that out of a weapon enchant, but those don't exist anymore. So the only other really good way is Tribal Fury, which I do use this on like a leveling unique amulet. I will enchant this opal, silver, and gold, so it's not cheap. I think I have that in one of my tabs here. There it is. Yeah, Tribal Fury. It's definitely very expensive to anoint, but it's really good during the like leveling process to have that. So I did set up this Astramentis with Tribal Fury for leveling. That's like a solid setup for leveling. But then once you're in game, I think it's better to just simply use a Melee Splash gem. And then for single target, what you can do, because we are using one Warcry, is you can switch over to Overexertion. And if I actually like look at the damage with Overexertion, like scaling up the Delirious effect, you can see I'm at like 35 million DPS. Scale up to 80% Delirious, still at 35 million DPS. At 100% Delirious, we finally go down to 22. So this is really good. I keep my Overexertion gem in my offhand, and if I feel like a boss is going to be really nasty in a tier 17, I will actually swap out my Melee Splash and put in an Overexertion and get like 20% more damage to really kill that boss quickly. Now, the reason I'm showing the Awakened Void Manipulation here and have it in here is as a warning. If you're playing a physical dagger, physical weapon setup, then Void Manipulation can be a good option. But if you're using elemental weapons, pneumatic daggers, which I am, Void Manipulation will absolutely brick your damage. It makes you unable to do any elemental damage, which then means that you're losing most of your damage. So I wanted to point that out specifically, that Void Manipulation is good with physical damage, totally horrible with elemental damage, which is the preferred setup. Other than that, I'm using Whirling Blades with faster attacks. I have Brutality hooked up to this because it deals elemental damage and I don't want to kill myself on reflect maps. And then I'm using Petrified Blood, Purity of Elements, and Flesh and Stone hooked up to an Enlighten. This is very basic defensive stuff. You can drop Flesh and Stone if you don't have the mana to like reserve it. It's not totally mandatory. I also played around with Arctic Armor, and I like Arctic Armor more conceptually. Like the fact that it doesn't have the small radius on it. Like I'll just show this off. I mean, you could see, right? The radius around you for Flesh and Stone to actually reduce damage taken from enemies is pretty small. And your melee range is actually pretty long with this build. We use Scion's Ambition, which gives you 40% further attack reach. And then I'm also using melee strike range enchant or prefixes on gloves and helm. And enchants on the weapon? No, I swapped over to crit chance. Okay, yeah. I have pretty long reach with my melee attacks, even though it doesn't look like it. But I still think that the damage reduction of Flesh and Stone it's very good. And Arctic Armor has the limitation of only working defensively if you're standing still. It's like 20%, 21% less fizz and fire damage taken if you're standing still. And you are standing still whenever you're attacking, but unlike with Toxic Rain, where I really like that, you're not really standing still and attacking all that much with this build. You are actually moving around quite a lot. And so I found that Flesh and Stone tends to be a little bit better. I've died less while using Flesh and Stone anyway. And now here we have the Warcry setup. I have this in my helmet, not that it really matters, but you do want to have it in a 4-link. And so what we're using is we're using Battle Mage's Cry to apply both of our buffs, or our curses, Despair and Alchemist Mark. And this is really annoying to actually like manually cast them. It's really annoying to manually cast Battle Mage's Cry. So we're using Auto Exertion. Auto Exertion has like downsides that are all pretty significant. You don't get the crit chance, all of that. You don't get any charges, whatever. That doesn't actually matter. And Battle Mage's Cry has the downside of the spells doing a lot less damage, but it doesn't actually reduce their effect. So you're just getting full value curse application out of Battle Mage's Cry for very, very little. It has like a small reservation associated with it. It won't cast it in my hideout, but I think it's like 11.3% to basically automate my curses, and this is just something I really like. Now, hypothetically, you could, instead of using Despair, you could get Despair from your Mercenary. It would be lower level, which is why I'm not doing that, optimizing for more single target damage, but you could use Ancestral Cry, and that would give you more clear, which I just don't feel like I need. I feel like my clear is pretty solid. I really want to optimize for single target. But Ancestral Cry, I think you, again, would just like with the Battle Mage's Cry, I don't think you need to go beyond level 1. Just keep the mana cost as low as possible. Ancestral Cry gives you your next 8 melee attacks will target 2 extra enemies. So it's just like a bunch of extra clear, but it doesn't do anything to help your single target damage, and in fact it lowers it because you're then having to shift that Despair over onto your Mercenary. So I like this setup. The only thing that I would say maybe that works a little better for single target, I suppose, is in the overexertion setup, because now you'd be exerting with two Warcries instead of 1, so you'd be getting more damage that way. But I think you're basically like trading a lot of Chaos Res in order to get more damage out of that, and only in that situation. So in the interest of keeping things as simple as possible, I just like this setup more. Then there's Ambush. This is really simple. It is just a travel skill that gives you a huge damage buff on your next attack, huge crit chance and crit multi bonus, and you press a button, it'll teleport behind the enemy, then you say out loud in your room, "Nothing personnel, kid," then you stab them and they die instantly. Then we have Withering Step, Automation, and Steel Skin. You can hook these up to enhance. I have done that, and then I ultimately decided not to, just because they were costing a good bit of mana, so I put them into my weapon setup. I tried to put them into my weapon setup so that I would have like the least amount of annoyance when I swap weapons for any reason. Have to turn off the least amount, or turn on the least amount of things. Unfortunately, I'm reliant on my weapons to have enough strength in it, so I still wind up turning off everything anyway. But that was the initial plan. So Steel Skin, Automation, Withering Step, pretty basic, all hooked up together. And then you can do them with Enhance, but I found that the mana was actually kind of annoying. Then there's Precision, Clarity, and Arrogance. The Precision isn't really necessary. I just hooked it in there because I felt like the extra little bit of crit's not bad. For the times when Ambush isn't up, you don't actually have 100% crit chance. You have pretty close enough that it's not a big deal. If you don't crit, you just hit them again. But, you know, yeah, I think that Precision is worth it. It gives you about 4% crit. So I think that's worth giving up a little bit of life, ultimately. And that's pretty much it for the skills. You know, that's kind of that. Now let's talk about the gear. So we're using a Doppelganger's Guise. I have a double corrupted Doppelganger's Guise with +2 level of socketed duration gems and 50% reduced extra damage from crits. Totally unnecessary. This is way, way, way an overspend on my part. I spent like 100 divines or more on this. Completely unnecessary. I think you get a decent Doppelganger Guise with a +2 level of socketed duration gems, which is what you're going to want, or +1 to level of all socketed gems. That would work fine. With a pretty decent roll on the less chaos and physical damage taken while sane. You're never swapping to be insane. You're always going to stay sane the whole time, Exile. And then this also has the bonus of giving you 10% of life over 1 second when hit while sane. Now, because we're using, where is it here? Petrified Blood. Anytime you're above 50% health, you're going to spend life whenever you cast a skill, and your regular life regen won't work above 50%, and that 10% of life over 1 second when hit also won't work. But that's okay, like Life Flask will take care of that. But once you're below half health, the amount of stagger you're getting out of a combination of like Progenesis and Petrified Blood is going to be really, really strong, and the Doppelganger guys is going to really like kick in and provide a lot of extra life regen during those moments. So you become really, really tanky below half health, which is obviously very good. Now, something I really like about Doppelganger guys over like, say, Lightning Coil, which I've used in the past and even used like in the last League version of this build, is that when you have like map mods that give you like, 35% less max res or something nightmarish, that actually becomes like a pretty significant liability, that converting Fizz into elemental damage, whereas this less physical and chaos damage taken doesn't get mitigated by or cut down by any sort of map modifier. It doesn't get cut down by any sort of like Eldritch Altar mods where there's like reduces your physical damage reduction, because this is less physical damage taken, not physical damage reduction, different modifier entirely. So it's just very, very good all the time. Really just an amazing piece of armor, the Doppelganger guys. Then we also are using an Ashes of the Stars. It doesn't have to be 30% quality. It's just nice, good quality of life. And then I'm using a Tides of Time. So you could, and I'm doing 3 life and 3 utility flasks on this, of course. And then you want to roll it with Fertile Catalyst. That'll increase the amount of life and mana. Not that the mana matters, but life you get out of your life flask. So that's pretty much it for the uniques I have equipped. The weapons are kind of special. They seem pretty daunting to roll. They're really not that bad. So what you can do, there's kind of 2 ways to set up your weapons, and I'll actually just pull up Craft of Exile. These are both related to each other, so we'll just start with a basic dagger. I think the best possible dagger, because you're looking for stuff that's very slow and just hits really hard, would be a Gutting Knife. I believe this has the highest damage roll, and then you're kind of wanting like a combination of high flat fizz and high crit chance. Gutting Knife is kind of the perfect thing. So what you would be looking for is just like a Gutting Knife with a fractured fizz roll, percent increased fizz. The roll chance, the weight on this is very, very, very low. It's really brutal to roll these, like to actually get percent increased flat fizz, or percent increased fizz, I should say. And so what you would be looking to do is just roll this with Essences of Contempt, which guarantees a flat fizz roll on it. Essences tend to roll somewhere between, like the amount of a stat that you get from most essences is somewhere between the tier 1 and tier 2 modifier value, which is like good enough, right? Good enough to get things done. And so what you would be looking to do is just simply to roll with Contempt essences until you get the tier 1 global crit multiplier suffix, and then you have to annul your way down until that's all that's on the weapon, basically, like T1 fizz, percent increased fizz, and global crit multi. And then you would just simply multi-mod. You would just craft, like, can have up to 3 crafted modifiers, and then you would craft percent increased crit chance and strength and int. I prefer that. I think that's better than just regular crit chance. Like, you could do regular crit chance. It's a little bit more, 25 to 27 versus 20 to 24, but I think the strength and int is worth it. And then you would also craft the prefix hits can't be evaded, and then there you go. That's like a perfect fizz weapon. You would quality this up, not put an enchant on it. You're pretty much done. Now, the way that you do the elemental weapon is a little different, but really not all that different. So you want to start with a pneumatic dagger. You can use a pressurized or hollow point dagger, I suppose. They're not really any different. The physical damage on them doesn't really matter, but pneumatic dagger is kind of the standard, and this only comes from heists. The end reward of heists, all damage from hits with this weapon can poison is the big implicit there. And so what you would want to start with is you could try and buy a fractured one. I think that's going to be pretty unlikely. You're basically going to have to fracture it on your own, and that's the most expensive part of this whole process. So you want to start with just an essence that gives like a good flat damage roll, and then you're just going to want to roll until you get another really good mod. You get like either a tier 1 flat fire or cold damage roll, or a T1 crit multi roll, or ideally kind of get multiple You kind of want to go for like 2 or 3 good mods. And then you want to annul down to 4 mods. Like, this would be a pretty decent situation here. And then you want to take a fracturing orb and then just like pray and close your eyes and click and hope it doesn't hit something that's bad. It hit the essence roll. It could be better, it could be worse, you know, like that's okay. And then what you would want to do is just simply do the same thing again, basically. I think in this case, because it hit the essence roll, rather than like the crit mod roll or the T1 fire damage roll, is you could take it over to the harvest bench. I did this because this did happen with this weapon, Soul Edge. I got the essence roll fractured. So I took it over to the Hoarder crafting station and I just reforged crit for a while until I got a damage roll that I was happy with and a crit multi roll that I was happy with. And then I annulled it down until it was just those 3 mods, and then multi-mod, strengthen it, and crit chance, and hits can't be evaded, right? Pretty simple. On this case, I got a fracture on the global crit multi, and so I just rolled with essences until I got a T1 flat cold damage, or fire damage would have also been fine, but rolled with wrath essences for guaranteed lightning damage, since that has the highest potential damage. And then, same thing, multi-mod, hits can't be evaded, guaranteed crit chance, ta-da. And then because these do primarily elemental damage, and we kind of don't even mind if the fizz damage is lower, enchant them with either crit chance or weapon range. Really, it just matters like whether you want to have like a little bit higher guaranteed single target damage out of the crit chance or better clear. I think weapon range is probably better, to be honest, even though I'm using crit chance right now. I think weapon range might actually be better. Either way, they're both pretty good in chance. I don't really think you can go wrong with either of them. And that's pretty much it for the weapon crafting. All the rest of the gear crafting was like pretty simple. Blizzard Crown is the next piece of gear. The reason we're using this is just it has this very high flat added cold damage. Not mandatory, you could just use like a regular helm with suppression or whatever. I think I just rolled this with essences. I think I rolled it with wrath essences to guaranteed light res, and then just did it until I liked the stats were on the weapon or on the helm, and I think I YOLO annulled off a bad prefix and crafted that melee strike range, and then that's it. Pretty basic. For the gloves, I bought some fractured chance to suppress and rolled them with essences until I was happy with the resistances, and then rolled the prefixes with Eldritch Currency until I was happy with the life, and again, crafted a mod on. There we go. The irritating part is rolling the non-vol strike skills target 2 additional nearby enemies. Rolling that with Eldritch Currency was pretty brutal. You want to use the like tier 3 currency, Grand Eldritch Ember, and then use Orbs of Conflict, like use, you know, Blue Ichor to get whatever mod on, and then use Orb of Conflict to level that up 1 so that it's exquisite. Unfortunately, that took me like 5 attempts. I burned through like 30 divines trying to get the implicits on these gloves. It was really painful. All right, and finally, as for the boots, I started with a T1 Fractured Life base, and then I just rolled them with essences until I was happy with the resistances on them. And then I locked suffixes and used Veiled Chaos Orb and Unveiled, tried to get move speed if you haven't been hit recently. That actually took me a lot of times. That is, I think, the lowest chance of all of the different move speed veiled modifiers. You can do move speed in onslaught on kill, like that also works just fine, but I got that like 5 times. I think I had to unveil like 6 or 7 times in order to get this. So these boots cost like 20 divines to craft, and if I had just settled for the other ones, I think it would have cost like 2. You know, it's okay. I'm ultimately happy with them. You know, they're working out just fine. Then as for the rings, pretty basic, right? I just got a Fractured Life base and then rolled it with Strength Essences until I was happy with the resistances on it, and then slap non-channeling mana cost, good to go there. And then this one, again, same deal. I got a Fractured Int base and rolled it with Strength Essences until I was like happy with the rest of the mods, and then non-channeling mana skills. And I have enough strength in it and dex to be able to equip all of my gear, which is always great. And that's kind of where we're at on that. As for flasks, you want an increased amount recovered, reduced recovery rate life flask, just like you do on all Pathfinder builds, and then bleed and corrupted blood immunity, of course. For Genesis, you really want that, and you want one ideally that has a good roll set in case you ever want to play this as a Mageblood build and still be able to maintain Progenesis uptime. I played around with the Mageblood version of it a bunch. I don't prefer it, but you can. You can do that if you want. I did buy a second Progenesis instead of copying over the one for my Toxic Rain Pathfinder. I literally am not sharing a single piece of gear between these two characters. I don't know why. I just felt like wasting a bunch of money. And then because Topaz Flask and Diamond Flask only require like 20 charges on use, you can get away with Alchemist prefixes on both of these where they're like increased effect, reduced duration, and then you can use that to fix resistances, you can use that to increase crit chance. They're both really, really, really good. Quicksilver Flask is a little bit touchier. Like I have a couple of moments here and there where if I'm not killing anything and I'm not hitting flasks and giving myself Alchemist Genius, like you can see that buff pop up there sometimes. There we go. Because I'm not like hitting that in the hideout, sometimes this will fall off if I'm in the hideout or I'm running around King's March or something, but in mapping, this is always up. Increased effect, reduced duration, like really effective, but you could just as easily get away with like just a regular increased duration or increased charge generation or something like that. And then, you'd move probably about 10% slower, but it's fine, right? You're getting reduced effective curses, so you're curse immune. That's really all you need. Additional Ellie res, crit chance, curse immune out of your magic flask suffixes. Very, very good. Now, I will mention the Mageblood setup. I do have a Mageblood floating around here somewhere. There it is. You can do a Mageblood. If you do a Mageblood and you're then, using Instilling Orbs to give yourself 70%, or Kindling Orbs rather, to give yourself 70% increased effect of your flasks on your Topaz, Diamond, and Quicksilver, you're going to move fast. You're going to very easily be 100% crit chance capped. And you're also going to have an easier time hitting 90% all res with melding. Like I think if I were to swap over to 70% increased effect, I would be at like 88 just with the current gem setup that I have, jewel setup that I have. And I have room to like reach over and hit this jewel socket maybe, and that would put me at 90. So that aspect of it is like pretty good. The downside to it, and I included this in the POB, is taking off Tides of Time means you lose a ton of life recovery. Like you go from 3,000 or 30, whatever it is, 3,000 life per second or so with your life flask down to like 1,200, 1,400. And so you really have to compensate for that with, I think Defiance of Destiny is the best option. It's just like a classic, really good option for any sort of build that can't leech to recover its life. So Defiance of Destiny works really well, but you do lose a lot of damage scaling out of Viper Strike of the Mamba by no longer having all that quality from Ashes of the Stars. So it's something you kind of have to balance around. Another thing you can play around with that I ultimately opted not to because I'm doing melding is Betrayal Sting. This makes it so that you have a 40% chance at the like max roll, and it is scalable with Noxious Catalyst up to 48% of applying a second poison when you inflict poison. So normally this kind of thing, like whatever, it doesn't work with Viper Strike of the Mamba, like putting 2 poisons on, but it seems to work with Betrayal String and Viper Strike of the Mamba. I have been told that this works. It seemed like it worked in testing. It's not like there's great indicators in PoE 1 as to how many poisons you put on the enemy. Ultimately, I just found that the 20 to 30% LE res downside was just like too much. And then also like not getting life and not getting like minus mana cost and stuff out of a ring was also just like pretty brutal. So I didn't really feel like I needed it, but it's something you can also play around with, especially early on in your gearing process. All right, I'll just mention the modifiers that are kind of a pain to do on this build. So Ellie Reflect is not undoable. Like it's doable, but anytime I get Ellie Reflect, I do swap over to Yugle so that I don't kill myself with reflect damage. And so that's like the first thing. I would say the second thing that really stands out to me is block. Monsters have a 50% chance to block attack damage. You are doing attack damage. So this is something you could swap around in the tree to compensate for. You could take like this wheel, multi-shot wheel. All of these nodes do absolutely nothing unless you get a good brutal restraint modifier out of it. But you can then take the mastery that makes it so monsters can't block your attacks. It's an option. It's not great, but it's an option. Avoid poison. Monsters have a 50% chance to avoid poison. This is terrible, and then the two of those combined are obviously very terrible. You basically can't do any damage. So this is just one that I just don't run maps that have poison avoid, kind of a build bricking modifier. Not totally undoable if you're doing risk scarabs though, because risk scarabs don't get scaled up by map mod effect. but as an explicit mod on the map, it is pretty bad. Cooldown reduction, less cooldown recovery rate, also not unplayable, but very, very irritating because we do like to use ambush, and we are using Warcry that's being cast on cooldown, so kind of a pain. Also, I guess we're using automation as well, so like, yeah, annoying. Then the classic Pathfinder bad mods would be like flask charges, reduced flask charges, and less recovery of life and energy shield are just both really, really awful. I also think that no regen and reduced effective non-curse auras are both just really, really irritating. So I don't like to run any of the mods that I've mentioned. That's pretty much it though. Like I'll do every single other mod, including like, minus max res and stuff like that. All right, now I'm going to mention my Mercenary. So I am running a Wither Touch. That is a Chaos Merc who does like Bane and Temp Chains by default, and then you can kind of get some other skills. I got one with Greater Soul Rend, so she is able to hit and apply on hit effects, which is really important. So I have her configured in my PoB under the party setup. I will just show her, show what she is. She is Merc, Wither Touch support. And her gear is as follows. She is wearing a staff that I crafted that has T1 increased malevolence effect because she does have malevolence. That's how I'm getting malevolence, how I'm triggering my malevolence Watcher's Eye. That's really all I'm getting out of the staff, but that's kind of all I care about out of the staff. Then I'm using a Crown of the Tyrant. I could just use a Crown of the Tyrant as this. It's fancy. It's got a foil on it. It's like a bunch of life. Nearby enemies have -10 all res. Getting flat added lightning damage because it's a blue socket. So there is that. You can use Harvest Bench to put a white socket on this if you're still using a Fizz weapon. Totally unnecessary though, very expensive helm. I'm also using Garb of the Ephemeral. I would say as for the helm, I have this like just a regular Hunter helmet with -9 Chaos Res and then some actually useful stats on it. Probably better. Certainly like more cost effective than the Crown of the Tyrant. I just wanted to like set a pile of money on fire while making this Merc basically, and she's way stronger than I am. She is super, super tanky. Now, in order for her to apply Temp Chains and not overwrite my Despair and Alchemist mark, I gave her an Anathema so she would have at least 3 on her curse limit. And then I gave her Ascendancy Gentle Touch so that like with stuff that she kills or whatever dies, where she had cursed mobs, like it'll explode. This has been pretty cool for clear. I'm also using Kalm's Binding with Malevolence aura effect on her. That works pretty well. I threw Ralakesh Impatience with Endurance charges on her just to make her more tanky, which doesn't even seem necessary, but it's working. Then I had this really high Elemental Res rolled Ventress Gamble with some pretty good rarity on it. Threw that on her as well, might as well. And then the final piece is an Eternal Struggle that is Searing Exarch dominant. It has pretty good mods on it. Actually, the Searing Exarch implicit is increased effective non-curse auras from skills while a unique enemy is in her presence. And then also I allocated leadership on it. So that is this modifier. Took me a while of looking around the tree to find it. It's this one. 30% increased aura effect, or area of effect of auras, and then 6% increased aura effect. So I'm never outside of her range. Like, she's always hitting me. All right, so in order to get this support to work, I gave her Malevolence, I gave her all the items that she was equipped with, and then I hit export support, generate, share, copy. I guess I actually don't need to have share, but copied it, and then I went over to my other character, the character that I'm actually playing, and I went to the party tab on that, and we'll just clear that out just to show this off. I copied in the code, hit import, and it imported everything, imported all of the bonuses that I was getting out of her. Probably don't want to be on 100% delirious, but it's fine. And yeah, now I'm like benefiting from her Malevolence with all the extra aura effect. I'm benefiting from like the, I think I'm benefiting from the reduced chaos res on enemies. I think that's all working correctly. I'm pretty sure this is working correctly. Like, you can disable party effects and see. Seems like it's working right. I think so. So, that's ultimately what I did, and it seemed like it was working correctly rather than doing like a whole section in the config, which I had played around with, but it was like quite a lot more effort to get that to work correctly. Alright, so that's Mamba Strike Pathfinder. It's an insane build. I wouldn't say it's a budget build exactly, but this deep in the league, I think it is one of the more budget builds that can deal this kind of damage while also being able to face tank uber bosses. It is insanely strong for the amount of investment required, and the potential to scale it up even further is really awesome. I'm such a huge fan of the Chaos Damage Over Time archetype, and I really think this is the strongest possible version of it. Alright, that's it. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and join the Skipping Sleep Studio Discord so you can say hello to me in Sunset if you haven't already. And finally, thank you to all of our channel members. If you want to support us so we can keep making more PoE content, become a channel member as well. Thanks for watching. Bye.